Thank you. So 1845 was the target date for the Bonn Beethoven Monument Statue Committee. 1845 being the 75th anniversary of the birth of Beethoven. If Schumann's contribution was any sign of how things went, we can understand that Liszt at one point suddenly decided that there was enough of this kind of banding about with money, and he decided to contribute all the funds needed, and as well as recommending a sculptor who would provide the sculpture in 2 years' time. Liszt was incredibly inspired by Beethoven from his very earliest years, and this call to raise funds for the monument was an extra push for him to start a project which would take him many years and which would result in one of the most incredible bodies of work that exists for the piano, and that is the complete Beethoven symphonies transcribed for solo piano. Liszt started off with the Fifth Symphony. Oh, by the way, can I have a show of hands? How many people here have heard of the Fifth Symphony? Anybody? Anybody? Has anybody here never heard the Fifth Symphony? No one. Has anybody here heard the Fifth Symphony played on the piano? Oh, a few people. Okay, good. Well, for most of you then, you're going to experience something which I think is very much like how people 200 years ago, or 170 years ago, how they discovered this piece. You have to consider that at the time of Liszt's transcriptions, there were not that many orchestras around. Among those orchestras, there were even fewer that had the technique necessary to play very difficult work like the symphonies of Beethoven. And then even fewer conductors who were conducting those particular orchestras who were able to play it. And so many people perhaps heard about Beethoven, but actually quite few discovered the works of Beethoven in their original form. The symphonies in particular were part of a series of transcriptions by unnamed anonymous pianists who had systematically produced four-hand versions of all the symphonic work and opera work so that people could take them home, and finding two people who had relatively good skills at the piano, they could kind of hack out something that resembled Beethoven's symphony, perhaps. There were many composers and pianists who tried to write one pianist versions of the symphonies, but it really was up to Liszt to create something which not only is an X-ray analysis of the works themselves, but also stand alone as works for solo piano. As I said, Liszt transcribed all 9 symphonies. He started with numbers 5, 6, and 7, which he played on his tours during the 1830s, 1840s. And then during a year of his life, well after his retirement, he spent an entire year working on the rest of the series. He had promised his publisher that he would produce all 9 symphonies. And he finished 1 through 8, and he got to number 9, which is Ode to Joy with the chorus at the end. And for some reason, that was a bit of a challenge for him to get all of that down to just 2 hands playing at 1 keyboard. So he produced a 4-hand version, sent it to his publisher with a dejected note saying, "I'm sorry, I just can't do the 9th." His publisher came back and said, "Oh, well, maybe you can try again." And he tried again. And he must have practiced, because in the interim time, he did produce a version for 2 hands. He did cheat, however, and put the choral line above the piano line, so perhaps the pianist is supposed to sing that as he plays. In any case, it's not surprising that Liszt started with the 5th. Not only is it the shortest, most compact of the 9 symphonies, it is also the one where the idea of a transcription actually fits the work itself. The 5th Symphony, you all know the opening theme. It's repeated over and over and over again, this motif, ba, 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 over and over, rhythmically, melodically, in the first movement, transformed into something else in the second, transformed into the third. Finally, the C minor, very tragic C minor, reaches an apotheosis and kind of an opening in the last movement in C major, with, again, this motif constantly being hammered out. And I think, for me, the idea of the piece is about struggle, and it's about overcoming obstacles through obstinance, through perseverance, through repetition, literally repetition of this motif. And I think that there's nothing that illustrates this sense of struggle and confronting obstacles better than having one pianist trying to play the music that was originally written for 50 or 70 people. When Liszt performed this work and other very challenging programs, he would very often have two pianos, one backstage, one on stage. And one can imagine that after the first movement of this particular symphony, that there would be so many broken strings and broken hammers that they would have to cart that piano off and bring the second one so he could finish the program. Tonight, of course, we have this beautiful Yamaha CFX, which, by the way, is a new model that just came out last year, an amazing instrument, and quite different from the instruments that Liszt was playing at the time. Pianos have evolved quite a bit, and so taking on the task of something like the Beethoven Symphony today, the risk is not so much will the piano survive, but will the pianist survive?